Locked in the void. Life inside Pelican Bay's isolation cells. The screaming wouldn't stop. It bounced off the concrete walls, slid across the steel door and crawled straight into Marcus Hill's ears. He was lying on the cold floor of Pelican Bay's security housing unit, the SHU, the place inmates called the void. But this scream, it wasn't his. It came from the cell next door. A deep, broken voice. A man begging for something, or someone. Then the sound changed. A loud bang hit Marcus's wall, hard, so hard the entire cell shook like someone was trying to punch their way through solid cement. Marcus pushed himself up slowly, heart racing, trying to understand what was happening because sounds in the SHU meant danger. They meant someone had snapped. Another bang. Then another. And then the voice from the next cell shouted something that made Marcus freeze where he stood. There in the walls. Marcus's back pressed against the opposite side of his cell. His breaths became sharp and fast. Because in Pelican Bay's isolation unit, it wasn't unusual for men to lose their minds. Days felt like years. Silence felt like punishment. Shadows felt alive. But this was different. The voice wasn't random. It was focused. It was sure. The banging stopped. The unit went quiet. Too quiet. Marcus stepped closer to his own wall, listening, trying not to breathe too loudly. He hoped the officers would show up. He hoped someone would open a door. But nothing happened. No keys. No footsteps. No orders shouted down the tier. Just silence so heavy it felt like weight pressing on his chest. Then, a slow, dragging scratch came from inside the wall. Marcus jumped back. Not on the surface. Inside. Like something was crawling, or someone was carving. His heart slammed into his ribs. His mind raced. He knew men heard things in isolation. Voices, whispers, footsteps that weren't real. But this wasn't in his head. He could feel the vibration through the floor. And it was getting closer. Suddenly, a small piece of concrete dust fell from the corner of the wall near his bed. Just a little bit, but enough to tell Marcus one thing. Something was happening inside the void, and whatever it was moving toward him. Then, without warning, a fist-sized piece of the wall loosened and shifted forward, like pressure was being pushed from the other side. Marcus took 2 steps back. And just as the concrete piece rocked again, like it was about to fall out completely, all the lights in the tier shut off at once. Total darkness. The kind of darkness where you can't see your own hand. The kind where your brain starts to make monsters out of shadows that aren't even there. And from that darkness, Marcus heard breathing. Not his. Not the man next door. Something else. Close. Slow. Like it was standing right in front of him. The darkness felt like it wrapped around his throat. Marcus whispered, barely able to speak. Who's there? The breathing stopped. And then a voice, whispering, shaky and broken, came from right in front of him. Don't move. Cut to the beginning of the story, how it all started. Before the screams. Before the scratching. Before the darkness. Before the void tried to take him. 3 months earlier, Marcus Hill was transferred to Pelican Bay State Prison after a fight in another facility left an inmate injured. Marcus had been in trouble before, but Pelican Bay was different. Everyone warned him, don't get sent to the SHU. That place isn't built for humans. That place breaks people. But Marcus didn't listen. The first days were calm. A low moment. Just the food slot opening. A CO sliding a tray inside. A cold cell. A steel bed frame. No windows. No daylight. No sound except distant footsteps and the hum from the vents. At first, Marcus kept himself busy, push-ups, sit-ups, pacing the cell in circles. Anything to keep his mind awake. But then the high started. Loud fights echoing from down the tier. Officers rushing. Doors slamming. A man screaming for medical help for almost an hour. Another inmate kicking his door until his legs gave out. Someone else yelling that he hadn't slept in 4 days. Pelican Bay's isolation unit didn't just make men quiet. It made them desperate. And day by day Marcus started to understand why the place felt alive. Why inmates said the walls pressed in after a while. One night, Marcus tapped on his wall to talk to whoever was next door, a small low moment just to feel human again. Tap, tap, tap. The man next door tapped back. That was the beginning. The next night he tapped again. This time the man didn't just tap back. He whispered Marcus's name. A name Marcus never gave him. Marcus stepped away from the wall slowly. How, do you know me? The man whispered through the vent. They told me. Marcus froze. Who? A long pause. Then the whisper came again, shaky, terrified, like the man was forcing the words out. The ones inside the walls. Before Marcus could respond, A heavy bang slammed against the man's cell. Officers ran down the tier. A man shouted. Keys jingled. Doors clanged. Someone screamed. An extreme event exploding in the middle of the night. Marcus pressed himself against his door, trying to see through the slot, but everything happened too fast. Officers forced the man out of his cell. He fought. He begged. He said they were coming. He said the walls were opening. Then he was gone. Just like that. His door slammed shut behind him. Silence returned. And Marcus stood alone in his cold, empty cell, wondering why the man knew his name, and what he meant by they. He barely slept that night, staring at the same wall the man had whispered through. Then, just as Marcus's eyes were finally drifting shut, a single, soft, slow scratch came from that same spot. One scratch. Then another. Then another. Marcus sat up, heart pounding. Something was behind the wall. Something was waking up. And as Marcus stepped closer, leaning in to listen, a chunk of concrete shifted just a little. Enough for him to know. The extreme event had begun. And something was coming for him next. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the small crack in the wall as the scratching continued. Each sound felt like a fingertip dragging along the inside of his skull. But then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. Silence returned, heavy and thick. He backed away from the wall slowly. A low moment. He told himself he was imagining things, that the SHU was playing tricks on him like it did to everyone eventually. He sat on the edge of his steel bed, trying to breathe normally, trying to convince himself that nothing was coming for him. But the silence didn't help. It made everything worse. 2 hours passed with no sound at all. No officers. No inmates. No movement. It almost felt normal again, calm, quiet, still. Marcus talked to himself just to hear a voice. Anything to feel human. He closed his eyes and tried to rest, telling himself he would talk to the officers in the morning about the noise. That was when Scene 3 began. Scene 3, the footsteps. Marcus heard slow, heavy footsteps coming down the tier. Not the usual officer walk. This one dragged, like the boots were sliding instead of stepping. Marcus stood up quickly and moved toward the door, trying to look out through the food slot. But he couldn't see anything. The sound stopped right in front of his cell. Then a voice, deep, unfamiliar, sounding nothing like any correctional officer he knew, spoke through the darkness. Why did you answer the wall? Marcus stepped back from the door, his chest tightening. The voice wasn't angry, it sounded curious. Too curious. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus whispered. The voice didn't respond. Just breathing. Slow. Steady. Too close. Then the footsteps dragged away, fading into the distance until they were gone completely. Marcus stood at the door for a long time, afraid to move. Afraid to lie down. Afraid to turn his back to the wall. He stayed awake the entire night. But morning came, and with it the guards doing their rounds, real guards with real voices and real keys. One officer slid breakfast through the slot. Marcus wanted to tell him what happened, but he knew how it would sound. Crazy. Confused. Like he was losing it. So he stayed silent. A low moment again. Everything seemed normal. Until noon. That was when Scene 4 happened. Scene 4, the wall finally moves. Marcus sat in the corner of his cell eating slowly when he heard the soft crack again. This time it didn't stop. It grew louder. Faster. Like something was pushing from the other side. Then the concrete chunk that had been loose the night before suddenly popped forward and fell to the floor with a heavy thud. A hole appeared in Marcus's wall. A real hole. Not a stress crack. Not a scrape. A hole big enough for him to see darkness inside. Deep, hollow darkness, like there was open space behind the wall where there shouldn't be any. Marcus crawled closer. He held his breath. Peered into the hole. He expected to see insulation, pipes, metal, something normal. But instead, he saw a narrow tunnel carved by hand, long, uneven, and stretching sideways toward the next cell. Someone had been digging. Someone had been inside the wall. Marcus's skin turned cold. He slowly backed away from the hole, his hands shaking. The man next door hadn't been hallucinating. Someone really was in the walls. And they were close. Too close. He moved to his bed, sitting with his back pressed against the opposite wall, staring at the hole like it was alive. Hours passed. The hole stayed silent. Another low moment. Marcus waited, scared but trying to stay calm. Maybe the officers would notice during count. Maybe this was his one chance to get out of the SHU if he reported it. But then evening came. And that was when Scene 5 began. Scene 5, the eye. Just as the lights dimmed for the night, Marcus heard it, the softest movement coming from inside the hole. Not scratching. Not tapping. Breathing. He stood up slowly, inching toward the wall, unable to stop himself from looking. His heart hammered. His palms sweated. The darkness inside the hole shifted, like something was leaning forward from deep inside. Marcus squinted, leaned in a little closer. And then, a human eye appeared in the hole. What? Wild. Unblinking. Staring directly at him. Marcus jumped back so hard he hit the steel toilet. The eye didn't move. It just watched him, calm but intense, like it had been waiting for him all day. Then the whisper came. "They know you're awake now." Before Marcus could react, the lights in the entire tier snapped off again. Total darkness. And the eye disappeared. But the breathing stayed. The darkness swallowed everything. Marcus couldn't see the wall, the bed, or even his own hands. All he could hear was the slow, steady breathing coming from the hole. Not panicked. Not rushed. Just calm, like whoever, or whatever, was inside the wall had all the time in the world. Marcus pressed himself against the farthest corner of the cell, trying to stay quiet, trying not to make a sound. But his own heartbeat felt too loud, thumping through his chest like it was announcing his location. Then the breathing stopped. Every muscle in Marcus's body tightened. He held his breath, waiting, listening. The silence returned, heavy, suffocating, waiting for him to make the next move. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. A long, low moment. Slowly, Marcus leaned forward, crawling a little closer to the spot where the hole was. He didn't want to, but curiosity weighed on him like someone was pulling him by the ribs. He stretched out a shaking hand, searching blindly across the floor until his fingers brushed the cool concrete. Still no breathing. Still no movement. The hole was silent. Finally, Marcus found the courage to speak. "Who are you?" he whispered into the darkness. No answer. He tried again, louder this time. "What do you want from me?" Still nothing. He sat back, pulling his knees to his chest. Maybe he imagined the eye. Maybe he imagined the whisper. Maybe this place was finally getting to him the same way it got to the man before him. Maybe. A soft tapping sound came from the wall. Tap, tap, tap. Slow. Rhythmic. Like code. Or a message. Marcus froze. The tapping repeated, but this time the pattern changed. Faster, sharper, more exact. It wasn't random. Someone was trying to communicate. Marcus didn't know the code, but each tap felt like a warning. A message he couldn't understand. He pressed his ear to the cold wall, trying to hear more clearly. Then the tapping stopped. Another long silence. Marcus backed away, staying alert, waiting for something to happen. Anything that would tell him what was going on. Hours rolled by. The lights never came back on. Marcus fell asleep sitting up, his back against the toilet, his head resting on his knees. That's when the next extreme event hit. It happened all at once. A violent slam shook Marcus awake, the sound of a steel door being kicked open hard. Then came shouting. Fast footsteps. Someone screaming down the tier. The sound bounced off the concrete like thunder. Marcus rushed to the food slot, trying to look out into the darkness. He saw flashes of movement, shadows of officers running with flashlights, beams cutting through the black. Someone was on the ground halfway down the hallway, thrashing like he was fighting something none of them could see. One officer yelled, "Hold him down. Hold him." Another shouted, "He's ripping at the walls again." Marcus watched, confused and horrified, as the inmate on the floor clawed wildly at the concrete like his fingers were knives. The man screamed, "They're inside. They're inside. Open the walls. Open them." Marcus's stomach dropped. The voice. It was the same voice he heard the night the man next door was taken away. They brought him back. And he was worse now. Much worse. Officers knelt on him, trying to hold him still, but the man kept fighting, his nails tearing at the floor until they bled. He wasn't looking at the officers. He wasn't looking at the ceiling. He was staring directly at Marcus's cell. Right at him. Their eyes met. And the man's face twisted into terror. He pointed at Marcus. "He sees you now," the man screamed. "He sees you. He's in your wall." Marcus stumbled back from the slot just as officers dragged the man away, still shouting, still reaching toward Marcus. And then the lights flickered once, twice, and shut off again. The entire tier went silent. Except for one thing. A new noise. A slow, deep, dragging sound. Coming from inside Marcus's wall. Growing louder. Growing closer. And then, the hole in his wall widened, a chunk of concrete falling away on its own. Someone was pushing through. Marcus pressed himself into the farthest corner of his cell as the hole in the wall widened. Concrete dust spilled onto the floor. Something, or someone, was pushing from the other side with slow, steady pressure. Not rushed. not frantic. Like they had been waiting for this moment. Then the sound stopped. Silence filled the cell, thick and tight. Marcus didn't move. He barely breathed. Everything inside him screamed to call for help, to bang on the door, to do something, but fear held him still. A low, tense moment. Minutes passed. Nothing came through. Marcus forced himself to step closer. One small step. Then another. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it echoed inside the cell. He crouched near the hole, staring into the darkness. The tunnel behind the wall stretched beyond what he could see, like it swallowed light. He whispered, "Hello?" No answer. He swallowed hard and leaned closer, squinting. Still nothing. Just a deep, empty void. He almost convinced himself to relax. Maybe whatever it was had left. Maybe he had scared it off. Maybe this nightmare was finally. Then he froze. A faint shape moved inside the tunnel. Just a shift of shadow, a slow, careful slide forward, like someone was crawling inch by inch toward him. Marcus stumbled backward, hitting his bed frame hard. The thing in the wall stopped moving. Total stillness. Another low moment. Silence stretched so long Marcus thought time stopped. His breathing slowed. His fear began to settle just a little, enough for him to think. He needed to distract himself. He needed to stay calm. He needed to remember he wasn't the only one who had suffered in these walls. So he sat down on the bed, thinking about how he even ended up in Pelican Bay's SHU. Thinking about the fight in general population that changed everything. He replayed the moment when another inmate named Trevor shoved him in the yard. He remembered trying to walk away. He remembered when Trevor swung at him first. Marcus fought back out of instinct. Only 3 punches. That was it. But the last punch knocked Trevor to the ground. Officers rushed in. The yard locked down. Trevor was taken to medical. Marcus was taken to the SHU. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't supposed to be here this long. It wasn't fair. A small low moment that made Marcus feel human again. He put his head in his hands, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Trying to convince himself the thing in the wall was nothing more than the prison breaking his mind the same way it broke others. That was when he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Right behind him. "Marcus." He froze. His body went numb. His throat tightened. He turned slowly toward the wall. But the whisper didn't come from the hole. It came from above him. From the ventilation grate. A second whisper joined it, the same shaky, broken voice he heard before. "He's almost through." Marcus fell off the bed, scrambling backwards on the floor. He stared at the vent, shaking uncontrollably. 2 whispers, overlapping now, both coming from the dark metal above him. "You need to run. You need to hide." Marcus shouted back, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The whispers stopped. The vent went silent. A long, trembling, low moment. Marcus stood up slowly, staring at both the hole and the vent. Something was happening in the SHU. Something bigger than hallucinations, bigger than fear, bigger than the isolation digging into his mind. He took one step toward the door, thinking maybe he could yell for help, maybe he could get the officer's attention during the next round. But before he could speak, a deep, heavy boom hit the other side of the wall. Hard. Powerful. The entire cell shook. Another boom. Then another. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. Something massive was slamming against the inside of the wall, right where the tunnel opened up. Marcus stared in terror as the hole stretched wider, cracking around the edges. A hand, pale, shaking, covered in scratches, pushed through the opening. Fingers curled against the concrete. Then a second hand. Someone was forcing their entire body into Marcus's cell. Marcus backed into the farthest corner, breathing fast and shallow. The hands pulled harder. And a face slowly emerged from the darkness. Skin torn. Eyes wide. Breathing ragged. And the man whispered with a voice like broken glass. "He's coming behind me. Run." Before Marcus could move. Before he could understand. Before he could scream. A much larger force slammed into the man from behind, yanking him violently back into the tunnel. He disappeared in an instant. The hole shook. A deep growl, not human, echoed from inside the wall. And something huge pressed its weight against the opening. The pressure against the wall grew heavier, harder, stronger, like something enormous was pushing from the other side, trying to fit through a space far too small for it. The concrete around the opening started to crack deeper, tiny fractures spreading across the surface like spider webs. Marcus couldn't move. He couldn't think. All he could do was stare as the hole shook again. A long, terrifying low moment. Then everything went silent. No breath. No movement. No sound at all. Marcus swallowed, his throat dry. He thought maybe it left, Maybe whatever pulled that man back into the tunnel had crawled deeper inside. Maybe he had time to call for help. But when he took one small step toward the door, a finger poked through the crack. Not human. Not shaped right. Long, thin. Too thin. It curled slowly, bending in a way no bone should bend. Marcus's legs weakened. He grabbed the bed frame to keep himself from falling. The finger slid back inside the wall. And then, an eye appeared. Not like the first one he saw. This one was larger. Darker. Reflective like oil. It blinked once. Slowly. Staring directly at him. Marcus backed away again, his back hitting the toilet. He wanted to scream, but nothing came out. His breath got stuck in his chest. The eye blinked again. Then the whisper came, low, rumbling, and impossible for any human throat to make. Marcus? He shook his head violently. No, no, stay away from me. The whisper came again, deeper this time. You opened the wall? Marcus covered his ears, dropping to the floor. I didn't open anything. Leave me alone. The eye narrowed like it was studying him, learning him. Then it disappeared. Another long silence. A false moment of calm. Marcus pushed himself up, trembling, and stumbled toward the door. He slammed his fists against it, yelling with everything inside him. I need help. Get me out of here. Please. His voice echoed down the tier. No response. He hit the door again. And again. Help. Still nothing. It was like the entire unit was empty. Marcus backed away from the door, breathing fast, panic rising in his chest. Then, faint at first, he heard footsteps. Real ones. Heavy. Rhythmic. Familiar. Officer boots. Marcus's heart jumped with hope. Here? I'm here. Something's in my wall. The footsteps grew louder, heading straight toward his cell. Marcus pressed his face to the food slot, desperate to see someone. Officer. Officer, I need. The footsteps stopped right in front of his door. But no one looked in. No flashlight. No face. Nothing. Just silence. Marcus stayed at the slot. Hello? Somebody answer me? A second passed. Then another. Then a shadow slid across the crack under the door. Something tall. Something wrong. Marcus stepped back slowly. Who's there? The figure on the other side of the door leaned close enough that Marcus could see the faint outline of a face through the tiny slit of light. Not an officer. Not an inmate. Something else. A voice slipped through the door, calm, smooth, too calm. You shouldn't have looked into the wall. Marcus shook his head, stumbling backward. What are you talking about? Please just call a guard. The voice replied. You called the wrong thing. Marcus's blood turned ice cold. The figure crouched lower, pressing its face close to the bottom gap, just enough for Marcus to see a glimpse of its mouth. It wasn't smiling. It was stretching. Wider. Wider. Too wide. The voice whispered. It's coming through. Marcus turned around just in time to hear another deep crack behind him. The hole in the wall split open wider. A hand, the same long, thin, twisted hand, pushed through again. Then a second hand. Then an arm. Marcus backed into the door, trapped. The shadow outside whispered through the crack. Don't turn around. But Marcus had to look. Something huge was climbing out of the wall. Shoulders scraping concrete. Breathing heavy and wet. Its fingers twisting like ropes of bone. As its head began to emerge, the lights flickered back on. Bright, blinding white. For one split second, Marcus saw the full shape of what was crawling through the hole. And it was not human. Before he could even scream, the lights snapped back off. Total darkness. And the sound of something massive dropping into his cell filled the room. The sound hit the floor like a body dropping from a rooftop, heavy, wet, and final. The entire cell shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Marcus froze against the door, his fingers digging into the steel as if he could push himself through it. He couldn't see anything. Not the bed. Not the toilet. Not the hole in the wall. Not the thing that just crawled into his cell. Only darkness. A thick, suffocating darkness that swallowed sound and breath and hope. Marcus held his breath, listening. For a moment there was nothing. Total silence. A long, trembling, low moment. Then, a sound he will never forget. Sniffing. Slow. Like something was smelling the air, smelling him. Marcus slapped both hands over his mouth to stop himself from breathing. His heart slammed against his ribs. Sweat dripped down his back in cold streaks. He pressed himself tighter against the door. The sniffing got closer. And closer. And closer. Something brushed against his foot. Marcus flinched, a choked gasp slipping from his throat before he could stop it. The sniffing stopped. Everything went still. Marcus didn't move. He didn't breathe. His mind screamed for him to run, to do something, anything, but his body was locked in fear. Seconds passed like hours. Then, very slowly, the breathing started again. But this time it came from above him. Right above his head. Marcus lifted his eyes instinctively, even though he couldn't see a thing. He felt the air shift. He felt heat above him. It was tall. Too tall. Standing over him like a shadow made of flesh. The voice that came next didn't sound like anything human. "Why do you hide?" Marcus shook his head violently, whispering, "Please, please don't hurt me, please." The creature's breath hit his face, hot, foul, humid, and Marcus gagged. The voice came again, closer. "You heard the walls. You answered them. Now you belong to the void." Marcus dropped to his knees, hands shaking uncontrollably. "I didn't answer anything. I didn't." A loud metallic clang cut him off. Marcus turned his head just slightly toward the sound. Someone was pounding on the outside of the cell door. Real metal. Real force. Real danger. "Open this door right now," an officer's voice shouted. Marcus gasped, tears streaming down his face. It was Officer Ramirez. Someone who actually talked to inmates like they were human. Someone who treated Marcus fairly. "Ramirez, I'm in here. Please open it. Something's." He stopped. The creature wasn't in front of him anymore. It wasn't above him. It wasn't breathing. It was gone. Ramirez kept banging on the door. "Marcus, step away from the door. Back up now." Marcus scrambled away from it, crawling across the floor. His hands shook so badly he could barely keep himself upright. The officer's keys jingled as he unlocked the heavy steel door. Marcus held his breath. This was it. He was getting out. He was safe. The door swung open. And Officer Ramirez stepped inside with his flashlight high, scanning the room. "Marcus, what happened? Are you?" But he didn't finish. The beam of the flashlight landed on the wall. The hole was now as wide as a doorway. Concrete shredded. Edges torn apart from the inside. Like something much too big had forced its way through. Ramirez froze. "What in the—" He stepped closer, lifting the light into the tunnel. His brows tightened. His jaw clenched. The tunnel stretched deep, deeper than any space should exist inside the walls. "Marcus, who did this?" Ramirez asked quietly. "Was someone in here with you?" Marcus tried to speak but couldn't. His voice was stuck. Ramirez turned to him slowly. "Marcus, are you hurt? Tell me." A sound cut him off. From inside the wall. A low moan. Long, slow. Far away, but getting closer. Ramirez took one step back from the hole. Another officer shouted from the hallway, "Ramirez! We need to shut that wall down. Get out of there." Ramirez didn't move. The moan grew louder. And then, a hand shot out of the tunnel. But not the creature's. A human hand, bloody, shaking, desperate, grabbing Ramirez's arm. "Help me," the voice screamed from inside the wall. Ramirez jerked back, terrified, but the hand clung tighter, fingers digging into his uniform sleeve. The officer in the hallway yelled, "Ramirez, move!" Ramirez shouted, "Let go! Let go of me!" But the hand pulled harder. And from behind it, something else moved. Something much bigger. Marcus screamed. "Get away from the wall." Ramirez finally tore free, stumbling backward into the cell. The door officer slammed the panel, locking them both inside for safety. But it was too late. From deep inside the tunnel, past the bloody hand, past the broken concrete, a massive shadow rose. It filled the tunnel completely. And it growled. Not human. Not animal. Something entirely wrong. The officers outside pounded the door, yelling orders, panicking. Ramirez raised his flashlight toward the hole again. And the shadow stepped closer. 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 Until two enormous eyes appeared in the light. Reflective. Dead. Empty. And focused directly on Marcus. The two enormous eyes locked onto Marcus like they had been searching for him the entire time. Cold. Unblinking. Wrong. Officer Ramirez froze beside him, the flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam shook across the creature's face, or what looked like a face. The skin wasn't smooth like a human's. It looked stretched, pulled tight over something too large, like it didn't belong to the shape underneath. Ramirez whispered, barely breathing, "Marcus, don't move." Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. His body felt like stone, pressed against the farthest corner of the cell. The creature didn't move either. It just stared. The silence between them stretched so long it felt like time itself was holding its breath. Then, the human hand still wedged in the crack twitched. The fingers curled. Trembling. Bloody. It reached toward Marcus again. "Help me," the voice cried from deep inside the tunnel. "Please, he won't let me go." The shadow behind the hand shifted. And something snapped. A sharp, sickening crunch. The fingers went limp. Ramirez stumbled back, gagging, turning away from the sight. "Oh God, oh God." Marcus's stomach twisted, his breath shaking, his eyes wide with horror. The creature stepped forward. Its long, twisted fingers wrapped around the edge of the broken wall. Concrete crumbled beneath its grip. It pulled itself closer, its shoulders squeezing through the tunnel opening as dust rained across the floor. Every instinct in Marcus's body screamed run, but there was nowhere to go. The cell was a box. A cage. A trap. Ramirez grabbed Marcus by the arm. "We have to get out. Now." They rushed toward the open door, but just as they reached it, the hallway officer slammed it shut again. Ramirez pounded the steel. "Open it. Get us out." "No," the officer shouted from outside. "Something's moving in the walls all the way down the tier. We need to lock this unit down." Ramirez's face twisted with rage and fear. "We are trapped in here with it." Marcus looked back. The creature had fully emerged into the cell now. Massive. Tall enough that its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Skin stretched too tight. Arms too long. Breathing deep and slow like a furnace. But its eyes never left Marcus. The creature tilted its head, studying him, memorizing him. Then it spoke. Not with words shaped by a human voice, but with a low, vibrating tone that rattled the floor, shaking the cell like an earthquake. "You opened the void." Marcus shook his head violently. "No. I didn't. Ramirez stepped in front of Marcus, flashlight raised like a weapon. His voice cracked with fear, but he stood his ground. "Stay back. Stay back." The creature paused. The beam of the flashlight hit its face. And instantly the creature recoiled slightly, its eyes narrowing. Ramirez noticed. "It hates the light," he whispered. He took a step forward, shining the flashlight directly into its eyes. The creature hissed, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed through the concrete. "Get back." Ramirez shouted, pushing the light closer. For a split second Marcus felt hope. A small, shaking low moment of courage. But then, the creature reacted. Fast. Too fast. It swung one long arm toward Ramirez. The flashlight flew out of his hand, smashing against the far wall and rolling across the floor, the beam pointing uselessly at the ceiling. Ramirez was thrown back, slamming into the steel toilet with a sickening thud. He collapsed, groaning, struggling to breathe. "Ramirez." Marcus crawled toward him, panic in his throat. Get up. Get up." But the officer couldn't stand. He clutched his ribs, coughing, his voice shaking. "Go. Marcus, just go." Marcus looked at the door, still locked. He looked at the creature, now stepping fully into the lightless space, its shadow covering half the cell. The creature's head snapped toward Marcus again. It spoke one more time. "You cannot run from the void." Then it lunged. Marcus scrambled backward, slipping on the cold floor, crashing into the bunk as the creature's massive hand slammed into the spot he had just been. The entire cell shook. Concrete cracked. The creature roared. The hallway officers screamed orders outside, pounding on the door, fumbling with locks, trying to open it. But they were too late. The creature crouched low, preparing to strike again. Ramirez whispered, barely conscious. "Marcus, the light. Get the light." Marcus's eyes shot to the flashlight lying on the floor across the cell. Just out of reach. Just past the creature. And the creature knew exactly what he was looking at. It turned its head slowly, blocking the path with its massive, twisted body. Marcus was trapped between the creature and the only thing that could stop it. The creature's body filled half the cell, its twisted shadow stretching across the floor like a dark tide. Marcus stared at the flashlight lying just a few feet away, close enough to see, far enough to cost him his life if he moved wrong. Ramirez lay slumped against the toilet, barely conscious, gripping his ribs. His voice came out thin and broken. "Marcus, listen. You can beat it, but you need the light." The creature's head snapped toward Ramirez, its neck bending with a bone-deep crack that echoed through the cell. Marcus lunged forward without thinking, planting himself between the creature and the injured officer. "Hey!" Marcus yelled, voice cracking. "Over here. Look at me." The creature slowly turned its head back toward Marcus. Its breathing grew louder, heavier, hungrier. A long, terrifying low moment. Marcus didn't let himself freeze. He took one step to the right. Just one. The creature followed the movement with its eyes, the muscles under its too tight skin stretching unnaturally as it tracked him. He took another step, then another, inching toward the flashlight, and the creature knew it. It hissed, a low vibrating sound that shook Marcus's bones. Marcus didn't stop. He kept moving. He was almost there. Almost. Just one more. The creature lunged. Marcus dove. His fingers slapped the floor, sliding across the concrete until they wrapped around the flashlight. He rolled onto his back, lifted the light, and click. Nothing. Dead. The flashlight was off. No, come on. Marcus smacked the side of it desperately. The creature towered over him, raising its long, twisted arm for a final strike. Marcus hit the flashlight again. Click. Still nothing. The creature's shadow swallowed him whole. It roared, a sound so loud it rattled the vents and vibrated the steel door. Marcus raised the flashlight like a shield. The creature's arm came down. Click. A blinding beam exploded from the flashlight, firing straight into the creature's eyes. The creature shrieked, a high, piercing scream, stumbling backward, clawing at its face. Its body slammed against the wall, cracking the concrete. Its skin peeled where the light hit, smoking like it was burning from the inside. Stay back. Marcus shouted, forcing himself to stand. He shined the light directly into its eyes again, and the creature convulsed, thrashing violently, smashing against the concrete until deep cracks splintered across the wall behind it. Marcus kept the beam steady, driving it backward inch by inch. The creature reached the tunnel opening, its safe place, and tried to crawl inside. No, Marcus growled, stepping forward, refusing to let it disappear again. You're not going back in there. He turned the light to full power, blasting the beam into the tunnel. The creature screamed again, pulling its body into the darkness, trying to escape the burning brightness. The walls inside the tunnel shook. A deep rumble echoed. Then, the tunnel collapsed. Concrete crashed down like thunder, sealing the hole completely. Dust filled the air. Marcus coughed, waving the debris away. The creature's screams faded beneath the rubble until there was nothing left. Silence. Real silence. Not the false, suffocating stillness of the void, but the kind of silence that comes when danger is finally gone. Ramirez lay slumped on the floor, breathing hard. Marcus rushed to him. You okay? Marcus asked, voice shaking. Ramirez nodded slowly. Yeah, thanks to you. The officers outside finally managed to unlock the door. It burst open and a team rushed inside. They pulled Ramirez out first, then Marcus. One officer stared at the collapsed wall. What the hell happened here? Ramirez whispered, seal this unit. Nobody goes into that wall. Ever. Marcus stepped into the hallway, feeling air touch his skin for the first time in days. Real air. Open space. Light. He turned back toward the cell, toward the wall that had almost taken him. A place built to break men. And something inside it still breathing beneath the rubble. As the officers led him away, Marcus said quietly, no one should be left alone in that place. Not with what's inside the walls. Pelican Bay's SHU door slammed shut behind him. But deep inside the collapsed tunnel, past the layers of broken concrete, where no human eyes could see, something moved. A slow, dragging sound. Not dead. Not gone. Just waiting. Because the void never lets go. It only sleeps.